Hello, Willow Lake third graders, and welcome to our reading lesson for today. We are going to talk about understanding the story, and I can't wait to go through this lesson with you and really learn alongside of you and think about what the story that we are currently reading, Indian Shoes, actually means and dive into that book a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're building a reading life. And like I said before, we're talking about understanding the story. And we're just not talking about understanding this story, but all of our stories. We are going to use this wonderful book as an example later on. So be ready. So I want to tell you about a little story I like to think of when I'm thinking about gearing myself back up for reading. It's been a long time since I've really gone and thought deeply about my reading. It was summer, I was on vacation. I'm a little, what you might call, rusty, just like this Tin Man here. Now, you might not have seen this movie before, and I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. This Tin Man, who is Rusty, is from a movie called The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, the main character, travels to a magical land called Oz, where she makes some friends, the lion and the scarecrow, and our star of the show today, the Tin Man. The Tin Man is Rusty, and he's not doing his very best because he's rusty. That's like us. We might be a little rusty, so we have to put some oil on ourselves, which is what you do when something's rusty, or practice our reading and try to think more deeply about it, right? Our version of putting oil on our rusty selves is practicing our reading and practicing these skills that are going to help us think more deeply about that reading. So last week we talked about preparing to be great readers and thoughtful readers. And this week we're going to talk about, once we're ready to read and once we're actively reading, how we're understanding our reading. You might hear teachers say comprehending. That word comprehending or comprehension means that you are understanding what you are reading and you're making a bigger meaning out of it. This is tough to do. We might be rusty with this, as I said before. Today, I'm going to teach you that readers give themselves checks to make sure that they understand. After every chapter, a good reader will stop and ask themselves a few questions. Do I know what's going on in the story? We have to really keep on track and make sure that we're not reading without paying attention and without looking for meaning. It's so easy to just put your eyes on text and to kind of casually breeze through. But we don't get as much out of our books when we do that. We can ask ourselves questions like, who is this person in the story? If I was reading about one of the characters, or I read about a new character, I would be thinking, who is this person in the story? Why is this person important? I wouldn't just be taking the information in, I would have to be thinking about that information. I might stop and ask myself, what just happened? If a big event or even a small event occurs, you will think, what just happened? If you're rusty like the Tin Man, you might not be thinking about this. That's why we're practicing and reviewing what we should be thinking while we are reading. We might also ask, does this fit with something that has already happened, or is this new? A rusty reader wouldn't even consider this. But we are going to be expert readers, and we are going to consider this. We're reading for a deeper meaning. If something seems funky in our reading, we're going to stop and really think about it. Let's practice. I'm going to read a part of our book, Indian Shoes, and then we're going to practice our understanding of the story. We're going to practice asking those questions to make sure that we understand. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Remember, friends, keep your ears out and be paying your best attention because we are looking for meaning. We're not just kicked back, relaxing. We are reading for meaning. Don't forget the pants. As Ray and Grandpa Half Moon climbed a flight of stairs to the front terrace of the rented mansion, Jonah appeared to greet them. "Welcome to the wedding," he said. "I believe, Ray," Grandpa began, smoothing his church tie, "that you and the groom have some business to attend to." Grandpa was right. That afternoon, Jonah, a Polish Menominee from Chicago, was marrying their friend Nancy Lee, a Choctaw girl who had moved from Norman, Oklahoma. She'd been friends with the Half Moons for only a year or so, but being every kid in the bride and groom's families was a girl, Ray had to pitch in as the ring bearer. Ray had never been to a wedding before. He knew he'd have to carry the ring down an aisle in front of a lot of staring people, and worse, a video camera. Ray's stomach flopped and flipped just thinking about it, but he was looking forward to the wedding cake. Jonah bent down in his gray tux. "This was my grandmother's wedding ring," he explained, digging it out of his breast pocket. "Today, it will become Nancy Lee's." Ray watched as Jonah set the white gold band in his palm. Tiny diamonds glittered. The metal felt cool in Ray's hand. "Sure is pretty," said Grandpa, who was carrying Ray's belt, socks, and dress shoes. "I'll take good care of it," Ray said, curling his fingers tight. He looked down at his fist and then handed the ring to Grandpa. "I mean, we'll take care of it." Jonah grinned, all bright-eyed and dimples. "I'd appreciate that," Jonah said. As it turns out, Nancy Lee remembered everything except a pillow to carry it on. Ray couldn't understand why he'd need a pillow to carry the ring. He'd been carrying rings his whole life without a pillow. "That's how it goes with weddings," Grandpa said, slipping the ring into his jacket pocket. "This or that always goes wrong." Ray and Grandpa Half Moon walked past a window framed in a forest green velvet curtains, climbed a spiral staircase, strolled down a hallway with fuzzy burgundy wallpaper. Let's pause. Can you imagine that scene? I'm going to read it again. Ray and Grandpa Half Moon walked past a window framed in forest green velvet curtains, climbed a spiral staircase, strolled down a hallway with fuzzy burgundy wallpaper, and joined the groomsmen in an upstairs bedroom. What a mind movie. I had to pause and mention it, friends. A row of rented gray tuxes and crisp white shirts had been hung in the closet, and Grandpa pulled out the smallest sizes in each after handing Ray his belt, socks, and dress shoes. "This'll look mighty handsome on you," Grandpa said, leaving on the plastic wrap. Ray headed toward the bathroom to get dressed for the wedding. "Need any help?" Grandpa called, shaking hands with the best man. "Nope," said Ray. "I'll be okay." He'd already tied on the tux at the fitting. My mistake. He'd already tried on the tux at the fitting, and Ray figured once he dressed, he could always ask for Grandpa's expertise with a tie. He didn't want to look like a little kid in front of the other groomsmen. Let's ask ourselves some questions now to make sure that we understood. We're going to pause and give ourselves a comprehension check. That word comprehension, again, means understanding. Who is in this part? What just happened? And does this fit with something that already happened, or is this new? A big question, who is in this part? Oh, it's some old Joe Schmo. I don't remember his name. Does it really matter? Whatchamacallit, whoever he was. No, friends, of course his name matters, right? That was a bad example. The main character's name does matter. We're thinking about Ray. Ray is one of the main characters, and his name is important. It's important to recognize and remember his name and know that he was an important part in that passage that we just read. Grandpa was also an important part. Grandpa Half Moon, to be specific. He was an important part of this story and is an important character in the whole story. We have to make sure that we're paying attention to that, and we can ask ourselves, who is in this part? Another thing that we can ask ourselves, what are some details about what is happening? So some details that might seem tiny but are very important to the story. They are at a wedding. Ray and Grandpa Half Moon are at a wedding right now, and Ray is the ring bearer. Seemingly small details, but very important. I want to teach you about a tool called a timeline that will help you when thinking about important parts of a story and the order that they come in. So when pausing and thinking about a chunk of our story like we are right now, we can add different events to a timeline. I want to show you what a timeline is and how it works, what purpose it serves before we continue. Here is a tool to help, timelines. And here is a timeline that I made as an example for you. It's a timeline of my life so far. A timeline has dates and the names of events. On the timeline, it shows you which event comes first and then all the events that follow it. We'll start in 1997. That's when I was born. So I wrote 1997, Miss Bryce was born. That's my very first life event. In 2006, I was in the 3rd grade. That's another important event that I thought I would share with you, so I put it on my timeline. It came after I was born, of course, in 2006. Later on, I graduated college. And you can think to yourself, of course Miss Bryce graduated college after she went to the 3rd grade. After that, I taught at Berkshire Elementary School in 2020. Later in 2020, after Berkshire, I started at Willow Lake Elementary, and it has been awesome, let me tell you. But anyways, you can see all of the different events that happened in order. It helps me keep track. If an important thing happened, I would go and I would put it on my timeline exactly where it belongs. It helps me keep track of the order of the story, and it helps the story make more sense in my head. Here is an example of James and the Giant Peach and how a timeline helped with this story. You can see that first, James was sent to live with his 2 cruel aunts. Even if I haven't read this story, I can see which events come first and what events come after. When a lot happens in stories, like this one, a timeline can be a helpful tool to keep track of the order of events. This is a review of what we learned last week. And I want to say again, this week we are focusing, and today especially, we're focusing on reading for understanding and reading for comprehension. You are going to get to practice stopping, reflecting, and really thinking about our story, Indian Shoes, but also your own reading. I think you'll find this very fun, and I think you will get a lot more out of your reading experiences.